Bentley here, and good evening to you. On behalf of the Calgary Climate Hub, I welcome you to our second season of A Climate of Change, our now monthly live cast exploring with thought leaders from across Canada what these wildly unprecedented times mean for addressing the climate crisis here in Alberta and how to create the impactful changes that we need. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yaqsi Nakota Nations, Métis Nations of Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. I'd also like to make a second land acknowledgement on behalf of another group of folks that have a stake in this land that we stand on today, and that is our children, our nieces and nephews and grandchildren, and all future generations. I urge you to keep them in mind during this time as we face unprecedented change and start making decisions about what comes next. For those of you watching tonight via Facebook Live or on the Zoomcast, please feel free to post some questions for our guests, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Should you wish me to not say your name, please type the word anonymous before your question, as this show will be shared to our social networks. Otherwise, we will assume your consent in the use of your name in this broadcast. Tonight's show is a little different, and I would argue special. You know, I was asked the other day, amidst the smoky skies and the ongoing global pandemic, what inspires me? Without hesitation, I responded that it's my next guest. To be very clear, it's not supposed to be the job of our country's youth to inspire we adults. Quite the contrary, we're supposed to be the ones inspiring them. That said, I can think of no group that speaks closer to me personally about what we need to be doing when it comes to addressing the greatest challenge in human history, which is the climate crisis, than youth climate action groups like Fridays for Future Calgary and the national level organization Climate Strike Canada. My very special guests, I'm deeply honored to welcome you to A Climate of Change. Here tonight, representing the national level organization Climate Strike Canada, are Adeline Cohen and Calgary's own Mackenzie Cummings to talk about the Not Going Back campaign and what a just recovery might mean for our country. And representing Fridays for Future Calgary, we have Rose Jackson, who's prepared to speak a little about a Green New Deal for Calgary. And then we'll have a conversation about all of those things. I want to begin, well, first of all, hello guys.
Hi there, thank you for having us.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
I'm very glad to have you guys. It's great that we can share a platform like this. Okay, so there's quite a lot that we can talk about tonight, and I want to just get a few sort of questions out of the way in a sort of a lightning round format. So, you know, just a couple of words. You don't have to expand on it too deeply. But the first question I have, I've asked all my guests so far, is, you know, when the pandemic rolled in and the lockdown happened, we all felt a big pause, and all of us sort of looked around a little bit. And I know that you, like me, had a few thoughts where you said, geez, I hope we're paying attention to this, or I hope that we're learning about this thing. So what I'm asking you is, what was the big teachable moment for you from COVID so far as it relates to climate?
Okay, should I start?
Sure.
I guess there obviously has been quite a lot of negative ones, but one positive I found is we can change so quickly. We mobilized around the pandemic extremely fast, and we can do the same around climate and anything else, really.
Mm-hmm. Rose?
We've really adapted quite fast. A teachable moment would probably be just prepare for the unexpected. Like always expect it. It's very hard to try to be flexible in such a confusing time like this, but I think we've managed by supporting each other and just trying to be present.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Adeline?
Well, that's a hard question. I think one of the biggest things for me was just reinforcing this idea that every calamity and disaster and negative thing in our society that we have to deal with, it always seems to fall on certain people harder than others.
Mm-hmm.
So this really reinforced the idea for me that if we want true equality, we have to have an equitable approach. So supporting people who are most adversely affected, and just paying attention to the way that these disasters and these negative events affect those most vulnerable people.
Yeah, that's a great one. Those are all great ones. Okay, next lightning round question. Uh, I personally was surprised that I've heard both Prime Minister Trudeau and the American presidential campaign for Joe Biden talking about Build Back Better. Are you encouraged that these world leaders are using that phrase, and there is more of an emphasis on climate plans in both of their approaches than perhaps we would say previously? Do you feel encouraged by that?
Well, I think it's good to know that that it's something that they've at least thought of enough to say, but we also have to remember that every word comes out of their mouth doesn't always happen, and we have to keep pushing that they do truly build back better with a just recovery.
Rose?
All I can really say is that I will feel encouraged when I see it happen, because we know that Justin Trudeau last year had a climate emergency announcement and then immediately passed TMX. So we have to be very careful of where we find our encouragement from. But it is a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Adeline.
I think I'm going to echo what my friends have said. It's very encouraging to see that they are recognizing that we can't go back to normal, that they're not trying to push this idea of, yeah, we need to go back to how it was, you know? But at the same time, we still need to exercise diligence in making sure that they actually follow through with those words.
Excellent. Okay, well, so my final lightning round question, it might not even be a lightning round question, I'm not sure, and you can probably all jump in however you like on this, but the question that I want to ask is, there's no right answer to this, there's only what you think, but has COVID spurred the climate action and policies that we need? Do you think this is going to be the thing that finally pushes us to where we have to go, or do you feel like maybe we adults may try to use this as another way we can just kick the can down the road again?
I think in a way, it's a sort of climax. It could very much go either way. There is so much hope and so many people doing amazing work towards a just recovery, but there are also government and individuals who are saying that this is why we shouldn't have environmental regulations and things like that. Right. So really, it is what we make of it. It's up to us.
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
I'll just say I second that.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, so to begin with, actually, sorry, Adeline, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, sure, really quick. So will we use this will adults use the COVID crisis to address climate change, or will they use it as an excuse to kick the issue of climate change down the road? I think it really depends. It really, really depends on the coming months and whether we recognize the relationship between the climate crisis and things like COVID-19. We know that this was most likely started via zoonotic transmission, which is the transmission of diseases from animals to humans. So I think if we can capitalize on that point, that the further destruction of habitats and the environment may lead to an increased risk of pandemics like this. And if we can just really acknowledge the relationship between, sporadic, unexpected events like this and expected calamities like those brought on by climate change, I think we can use this to push for better climate action and necessary climate action.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody who isn't as climate conscious as me just last night, and what I was trying to get across to them is you have to notice that there's a whole bunch of things that have been broken for a long time that are all seem to be coming to a head at the same time. Like, you can put the racism problem right smack dab in the middle of this, and the immediate future is multiple crises going on with a steady climate crisis going on in the background. I mean, you don't get a better example than Florida. The whole western coast of America was on fire, And so you couldn't go outside because of the smoke, but you couldn't congregate inside because of the COVID. And so it's, there's challenges like we've never faced before coming up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, it's a bit of a reckoning. Like, these things have all come to a head right now, and we can't ignore them any longer.
So I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about Climate Strike Canada and not going back. And I want to identify that I really like that phrase. I have been using that phrase, and I think that we're tapping into the same zeitgeist if that's the case, and I think that's wonderful. What does not going back mean to you?
Well, from official campaign standpoint, it's we can't go back to normal, and also there was perhaps going to be a longer term strike, as we're not going back to work, school, etc. However, right now we're not going back to normal, and it means that before COVID-19, there was plenty of issues, and these issues are still here and they're still pressing, and we need to solve them ASAP. Yeah, so I'm not sure if people are aware, but the Not Going Back campaign was launched between Climate Strike Canada and Our Time, and it launched on Friday, September 11th in Ottawa with a press conference. And essentially it's we can't go back to normal. There is 3 main demands that were: invest in people, not corporations, dismantle racism and colonialism, and to treat the climate emergency like the emergency that it is. And under that falls many other demands that are all part of a just recovery from COVID-19.
It's worth, I should mention that throughout this broadcast for our listeners, we are placing links to any of the relevant sites that we've been able to identify, so that if you want to read more about Not Going Back or Climate Strike Canada, you can check out that chat. It's also will be posted on our Facebook Live, so folks can check that out as well. Okay, and then Adeline, maybe what can you tell us about Climate Strike Canada as an organization?
Well, to put it simply, we're kind of like a network, or a network of different local climate action groups. So we connect climate action groups in different cities to one another, and kind of help coordination and help with, just coordination and sharing of information.
And everything mainly inspired by Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg, as well as some Indigenous icons, such as Autumn Peltier, the Six Nations, Wet'suwet'en. Well, obviously, some of these icons have emerged after we started, but we find a lot of inspiration in their actions and their causes.
Excellent. So I feel like not going back is a phrase that resonates for me, and I've been vigilant of for a few years now. I've been waiting for the right hashtag for the climate crisis, and for some folks, you could just write it off as, oh, it's another one of these Twitter things or a social network thing. But from my perspective, some of the biggest social change in the last 20 years had a hashtag in front of it. Like Me Too started out as hashtag Me Too. Black Lives Matter, the first I ever heard of it was hashtag Black Lives Matter, and that's how it traveled around. And so I guess my question would be, is not going back that could not going back be the hashtag or the rallying cry for folks on climate, do you think, especially as it relates to COVID?
I think it could be. I think if people want to use it, you never know what's going to go on in the social media world. But at this point, we also don't need to rally everyone. We only need to change maybe not opinions, but actions of those in power. And I think the climate movement is not, I'm not going to say we're over rallying tons and thousands of people, but we're also going to start demanding certain things from our government. It's no longer quite so symbolic with kids sitting outside in front of a government building. It's, we have specific demands and action that we want now. And it, yeah, I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I have your legislative demands that you had, that your organization put together ahead of the Trudeau throne speech, and it's a thing where it's like, it's almost become a cliche for adults to say how impressed we are with you youth activists, but like, you know, I try to think of what I was doing when I was your age, and I wouldn't have even known A, what a throne speech was, B, when it was, C, let alone know what to want from them. And so it's just so impressive that what you guys are doing. It really blows my mind. So I want to make sure, again, anybody who's paying attention or watching this broadcast, we do have a link in the chat so you can see some of these legislative demands. And you know, I guess my expectation would be that anything that you feel like is not answered for in the throne speech, you're going to be holding the government to account for and asking them to make sure that they've got it in there. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I guess what I'd like to know is, well, I mean, as far as a just recovery, are there some things that you feel, I'm conscious of when I'm trying to promote climate things to different groups of people, I try to think about what's an easy win, what are the things that I can promote, that I shouldn't get opposition to unless they're just fire breathing angry at anything involving climate. So are there some things that you feel like this should be easy for us to do, low hanging fruit for a just recovery for Canada?
Well, definitely things like pharmacare and universal mental health care, because I think those are things that were mentioned in the throne speech. So those are already on the table. Some things that have already been in progress are supporting workers, specifically oil and gas workers, in this campaign called A Just Transition. So I think that's already, you know, maybe it's not low hanging fruit on that one, but it's we're already partway up the tree, so to speak.
I like the analogy.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's neat. You know, what I like about just recovery is we're building on the just transition that we're all used to using that language, or at least we climate folks are used to using that language. But just recovery means that we're recognizing that COVID has changed the landscape. And so switching the word from transition to recovery, I really feel like to me, the meaning of it is we're going to have to recover from this, and money has to be spent on this, and jobs programs will have to be created about this. So it's got to be something that accommodates the most essential challenges of the day regarding climate and all of that. And so it's a great thing for you guys to have seized on. I guess that might as well segue into, you know, speaking about going from not going back and to a just recovery. It's a natural follow through to talk about a Green New Deal for Calgary. And so we have Rose Jackson here from Fridays for Future. And of course, Mackenzie's also a member of that. Mackenzie's wearing 3 hats today because she's also a member of the Hub. Well, actually, I mean, maybe Rose, you're a Hub member too, but so anyways, we're all working on the same team here. So Rose, I guess, you know, taking a look at we've also got a link that's going to be in the chat that goes to some of the items on the Calgary Green New Deal platform, and that's a comprehensive piece of work there. So maybe what can you tell us about that plan?
So,
Okay.
Project has developed a document. So there's 5 main sections. There's housing, there's transit, there's social services, there's food security, and there's energy. And those are the 5 main points, but they're always looking to have more expansions upon that and researchers to come together to work on it. And they kind of go into different aspects. And a lot of them, all 5 sections have different levels to them. So it goes from community/municipal, provincial to federal. And they're all actionable items that can be reasonably taken within the next couple years. Most notably, we do have our food security section, which kind of goes into making sure that people have access to food, so combating food insecurity through community-based initiatives, repurposing community centers back into what they should be, a place for communities to come together to help each other, and that kind of goes into social services and like recentering communities around those centers through healthcare, elder care, childcare, things like that, LGBTQ centers, and sustainability programs.
Mm-hmm.
Housing kind of goes into retrofits, affordable housing for youth and marginalized communities, and going into public access to the land and things like that. And then we also have our energy and transit. So utilizing, especially here for Calgary, we do have only 2 lines. So expanding upon it, we're now getting the green line, which is amazing. Now we kind of have to work towards improving the transit accessibility and like through bike paths, walking paths, and increasing the interconnectedness of our cities, because it helps with community enrichment and helps people with disabilities, and it makes sure that we can take more people off the roads. And yeah, and our energy section is more so focused on a just transition for workers. And that's probably the most important part of the just transition, is ensuring that workers have the means to transition. A lot of oil and gas workers, they have the skills, they have the knowledge, and that can easily transfer to green energy sector jobs. So through job retraining programs, having actual plans and concrete ideas of how to actually do that for the company, do that for the communities, to make sure that no one's left behind. And it kind of goes into just recovery, making sure that people who were hurt by the economic crisis, making sure that people who lost their jobs can actually regain their jobs back, and make sure that the communities recover, things like that.
Yeah. Mackenzie, did you have something you wanted to say on that?
Oh, I was just going to jump in real quick. If people are interested in the demands, the Climate Strike Canada website is not a good place to look. That's not our going back, our just recovery demands. That's kind of an old website that hasn't been updated. I'll just pop them in the chat real quick.
Sure.
So that's what my random typing is.
Oh, okay, no problem at all. Yeah, the article that I included earlier for not going back was from newswire.ca. And it did have a list of your demands there, but by all means, put that in there. We want to make sure we get it right. Rose, do you have, is there something in the Calgary Green New Deal that you're just like, well, this is just cool and we should do this? Like I know all of it makes sense to do, but is there something that really jumps out to you like, come on, why we have to do this?
Okay, there's like a lot of it. I love all of it. Mostly the focus on Indigenous practices. Since I'm AT, I know that and also the fact that a lot of Canada is biased against Indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the idea of combating the water security crisis, going back to restorative justice, and centering a lot of our education to include Indigenous practices and curriculum, so we know what Canada's done, because Canada is not innocent, and things like that. And
Right.
having that Indigenous voice and centering a lot of our conversations around it is really important.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, because whenever I get a chance, I like to mention that for me I mean, you don't get a more privileged human than me. I'm a big, tall, white man. But my whole life, I've been hearing Native cultures talk about learning to appreciate and respect and communicate with the land and nature. And I feel like, how can any of us turn our nose up at that now? And I really feel like, there's a lot to looking into how Indigenous cultures manage land in the first place, and how the relationships that they're establishing, and finding a way that we can get closer to that. We should be learning from them. They've been doing it for forever, so Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Mackenzie, does anything really jump out about the, do you have a favorite element of the Calgary Green New Deal that jumps out at you?
I don't know. I like them all. And I
Yeah.
think that thing is they're not just cool, they're also very much necessary for a sustainable future for Calgary.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I think I saw in there, I was reading a few things today, so I want to make sure, but more of a focus on the land that we do have, that we're growing what grows naturally, as opposed to like things that just look shiny and green that need lots of chemicals.
Yeah, when it comes to food security and land management, that's a big, Permeate is a food security and gardening group. So that's what they're very passionate about. And I think that that's a very, we should do this first. We have so much lawn space. We can be growing food for our communities. We can make sure that no child, no elder, no one gets left behind in terms of food, because we have the means to do it. And lawns are very much a classist idea, if you know the stories behind what lawns are. So kind of repurposing it, going back to biodiverse lawns, going back to food gardens and food forests. I think that'd be a really great idea to kind of repurpose that.
It's another thing where I feel like you look at COVID just keeps giving us new examples, right? And at one point, I remember, when the pandemic had just started up, and there was lots of talk about whether we were going to close the border or not. And online, I was seeing a lot of folks saying, "Oh, we can't close those borders because the president of America will get mad at us, and who knows what he'll do," and la la la. And I feel like there's a strong case that can be made for us to say, hey, look, we have a whole lot of land in Alberta. We've got more sun than anywhere else. We've got all this land. There's a case can be made that we could be doing a whole lot more to supply food, not just for ourselves, but for the rest of Canada. And why not save the world, right?
Yeah, exactly. Instead of going from monoculture, we now have permaculture, and it's it's mind, body, soul, physical. We can create food, and we can also help grow with each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Maybe I'll ask Adeline, just as you might not have dug right into the Calgary Green New Deal, but just of general Green New Deal principles, is there something that that's a favorite of yours that you feel like, oh, why don't we just do this?
Well, there's a couple of things. Well, first of all, just making, like you were talking about, land use. I'm an immigrant, and I have lived in this community for over a decade. But in my time here, I've seen acres and acres of farmland be turned into sprawling suburbs, and that's not an efficient use of land, and
Right.
that's not very livable either, because suburbs, not a ton of cookie cutter houses, not a ton of walkability, not a ton of access to good transit and stuff. So there's that. The other thing that I really like is retrofitting. So our second biggest, or our biggest, one of our biggest sources of emissions in Canada is our buildings. And the thing is, in my province in Ontario, our buildings are so inefficient, not efficient in gas use, not efficient in electricity, horrible in the winter for heat efficiency. If we can learn to retrofit our houses and have green building standards that says all new builds have to reach a certain level of energy efficiency and sustainability, that would go a very long way to bringing our emissions per capita and our footprint down.
Yeah.
Addie,
yeah, go ahead, Mackenzie.
Addie, I was just going to say that's pretty relevant to the Whitby Green Standard that just passed recently. I was going to say you might want to talk about that.
Okay, so
sorry.
Okay, so basically the Whitby Green Standard. So about 18 months ago, Whitby, my town, declared a climate emergency, and almost immediately they started working on this piece of legislation that would basically call on all new developments and all new builds to have a certain level of efficiency. And there were 4 tiers for efficiency, with 1 being the lowest tier, which is still above our current standard, and 4 being I think it's carbon neutral. So basically, the idea is they implement tier 1 immediately, immediately raising the standard for new builds. This obviously got opposition from several developer associations. There was consultation, but there was still some pushback. But yes, this green development standard, it passed on Monday, which is incredibly exciting for us. And yeah, it's aimed to really help us improve our emissions, because without it, if we kept on building the same buildings at the same standard that we have been for like the past couple of years or past decade or so, we would have blown past our emission targets, no matter what strides we made in reducing our transportation emissions.
Yeah. Well, you know, a point I make to again, a less climate conscious friend of mine who's really smart person who works in the construction industry is, you know, this renaissance or revolution or whatever it is has to be built, and it will have to be built by construction people, and so that's jobs, that's money, that's industry, and you know, so I feel like where the developers may be against this, the construction associations and every construction company should see this as something that's going to help them and be a significant source of income over the next coming years. Do you think?
Oh, definitely. And not to mention, it can help us deal with our housing crisis by making homes a lot of our houses are on the waterfront of Lake Ontario, and obviously, as climate change kind of wreaks havoc on that ecosystem, on that hydro system. That climate change is going to be a huge concern for all of those houses down there. You know, entire suburbs that are sitting basically right on the beach of Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a little break here to talk about our sponsors. So first of all, I'd like to take this moment to recognize the support of the Alberta Ecotrust Foundation, who does so much important and great work in this province, for supporting the Calgary Climate Hub and this broadcast. I'll also take this moment to announce a Green Jobs Alert for this great organization. Alberta Ecotrust are hiring 2 program specialists, one in Calgary and one in Edmonton, to work on their Climate Innovation Fund, which is as green a job as you could possibly hope for, in my humble opinion. If you think you or someone you know might be suited for this opportunity, Ecotrust is taking applications right up until September 29th at midnight. So that's coming quick, but you do have time. So again, if you know of somebody who may have the qualifications, or maybe you've got them yourself, check into it. Look it up. We've got the link is included in the chat, so go and check them out. And thanks again to Alberta Ecotrust. Just speaking on behalf of the Calgary Climate Hub, I'll speak again a little about them at the end, but I would like to let folks know about what's coming up for us in the next couple of weeks. With the smoke from the fires in the United States choking Calgary last week, Climate Week 2020 seems like a good time to remember that the climate crisis is not a distant threat. It's a current catastrophe. And right now, the Calgary Climate Hub is gearing up for the city budget in November. We need to remind City Council that we're not going back to normal. If we're going to build back better, we have to focus on some key priorities, including protecting the most vulnerable and taking action on climate change, and protecting transit service, and saying no to more sprawl, and getting NMAX to net zero. If you'd like to help, reach out to volunteer at calgaryclimatehub.ca, and I will post that in the chat. I guess normally at this point I would make a comment or sort of an advertising moment for Fridays for Future or for Climate Strike Canada, but tomorrow they have a great big event going on, and so I feel like why don't we talk about that a little bit instead, and then by virtue of that we can get to how you can help these great groups and organizations. Okay, so tomorrow is, what's the official title for tomorrow?
We have pamphlets that says it's basically Calgary Youth for Climate Justice and a Green New Deal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and is it Global Climate Strike Day? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's called, it's the, we call it the Global Day of Action, if it's, we're talking about everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, so walk me through it. That starts at noon. Where does it start?
We're going to be starting at City Hall. We've also partnered with the Extinction Rebellion, so we're going to have a bunch of speeches at the beginning. So that's going to take about 20 minutes as everyone settles in, going into a chants and kind of more rally-based stuff, activities, chalking, stuff like that. And then we're going to be marching to McDougall Centre, so going from municipal to provincial politics is going to be very important here. And that's kind of like what we're going to hopefully do. We're going to have some people leading the march just down Stephen Ave and just towards McDougall, which is like about a 15-minute walk.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And Adeline, you are not in Calgary, are you?
Nope. If anyone is interested in flying all the way over to Whitby, we would welcome you, but
Right. Okay. Well, so, you know, and again, for our viewers watching either on the Zoomcast, or it seems like a lot more folks tune into our Facebook Live for this. I just would like to let you know that Fridays for Future Calgary, you know, the story I tell frequently is it was minus 28 or whatever it was. And these guys are out there on a Friday afternoon fighting for climate action. And, you know, I know a lot of people that have never lifted a finger. And, you know, it really takes courage and grit to be out there every week. I can tell you, they probably have heard adults say things that would enrage you and make your hair curl, but I'm sure at the same time they hear encouraging things. What encourages you guys when you're out there fighting for climate action on a Friday afternoon?
I guess for me, a lot of it is the other people who are fighting for climate action. It's a really inspiring group of youth, both on the municipal and national and global level, really. Yeah, and it's also amazing whenever somebody who maybe doesn't quite know what's going on but gets excited once they do learn. That's I guess where the hope comes from.
Right. How about you, Rose?
I really enjoy talking to people within the group, but also outside. I like talking to people who don't really understand climate action. Coming from an environmental science background, I like just talking to people and kind of educating them a little bit and getting them just informed, because a lot of people just don't bat an eye when it comes to this, or they kind of just don't really care. And it's something really important that we need to have conversations, and those tough conversations, especially people who don't believe in climate change, who don't really care about the youth voice at all. So I don't know, I'm not confrontational, but I do really enjoy having those like really deep conversations.
Right. Yeah, and I think it gets easier to make these conversations now that, I mean, it's sad that it came to this, but people are familiar with tasting smoke now, and you know, and some other things, and so, you know, there's more openness to it now. But you still do run it. I still run into some diehards, you know, through my own travails, as you can imagine. What about Adeline? What inspires you when you're out there, or, you know, what gives you hope when you're out there fighting for climate action in Whitby?
well, I think like the thing that inspires me most, and usually this doesn't happen for in-person strikes, but just generally when we have another action and then when it's over, someone comes up to us and says, hey, I wasn't really involved with climate justice. I wasn't really caring about climate change very much before this, or before I heard about you guys. But I think I'm starting to get interested, and I'm starting to really want to get involved. Things like that, just, you know, being able to know that there are people who may not have cared before, but who are kind of learning of the importance of it and are feeling inspired to act because of us. That, like, I could Like 2 years ago, I could have never imagined that I would inspire someone to take action. That's incredible.
Right.
And so it's just very, very encouraging to hear that.
Nice. Okay, so the one of the prime things that I'd like to be able to pull out here is, you know, I'm here interviewing you guys on behalf of the Calgary Climate Hub. So my question is not only how can Calgary Climate Hub be a good ally to your organizations, but also how can the hub help concepts like not going back, concepts like a just recovery, concepts like a Green New Deal for Calgary. So that's sort of a two-headed thing, I guess you'd say. So that, you know, on the one hand, how can we as an organization help your organizations? And then on the other hand, how can we as an organization help those specific initiatives? Maybe Adeline, do you want to start with that?
Sure thing. So one thing that I've, with Fridays for Future with which is my local group, one thing that we've struggled with is reaching people that we haven't already reached. So just reaching out to that wider audience is incredibly, it helps us a lot. Yeah, and just listening to us, because listening to us as equals, because like you said earlier, a lot of the times we hear stuff like, oh, thank you so much for speaking. It's so inspiring to hear youth speak and stuff. And, you know, it's great to hear that. But oftentimes they'll say, thank you so much for speaking as youth about your future. It's so great to see young people involved. And then they'll vote against climate action, you know? So just speaking to us as equals, being honest with us, talking to us as just fellow humans who are concerned. Yeah.
As far as not going back goes, as far as helping push along, making that phrase a rallying cry, is there I don't know if there's an answer for this or not, but is there something the hub can do that can help make that phrase gain meaning?
Well, I think everything does push it in the right direction. The majority of the not going back campaign was centered more on throne speech, although I'm sure it will forever be evolving and continuing. We do have something on the wearenotgoingback.ca where you can write and call your politicians, although I believe that might be kind of before throne speech, but it's never a bad thing to tell your politicians what you think. And for the Calgary Climate Hub specifically, again, we get stuck in those echo chambers a lot where it's not helping anyone to tell people about all the climate science. So whatever reach you do have, or anyone watching has, to just tell people that this stuff's going on. Mm-hmm. And then my last one is you can subscribe to our newsletter at Future Calgary. We put out tons of stuff through that about how you can take action in any events and campaigns going on that we know of. So I'll put the link in the chat real quick.
Okay, I was just going to say, how can we make sure our viewers can get that? That's great. So you'll put that in the chat, and then we'll put that into the Facebook Live. Rose, how can the hub help Fridays for Future? You know, we try to partner with you where we can, but what else can we do?
Kind of how Adeline was saying, reaching people who we can't necessarily reach, because a lot of the hub members, they have jobs, they have a lot of friends. Having those conversations with those types of people that we don't necessarily have the experience or I guess the reach for. Since I'm a university, I'm at home and on campus. I don't have time to go to another business to talk to them for hours on why climate action is important. Mm-hmm. So ensuring that we keep these narratives and just these conversations, and always bouncing ideas off each other and talking about it. Talking about it is always going to be the most important thing. And kind of breaking your comfort zone, trying to redefine what can be possible and thinking outside the box is really important.
Right. Okay, so I guess sort of the last question that I have, depending on where it goes, is, as you may or may not know, the Calgary Climate Hub is kicking off our community climate conversation series again. It will be all a digital program For Adeline, you may not be familiar, but prior to COVID, we were going around to communities across Calgary, bringing a host of experts with us. Rose has been one of our guest speakers before, and we created an environment where folks that are from that community that care about climate can be around other people that care and can learn from experts and have bona fide real conversations. And so we are kicking that off again. And one of the things I'd like to, this may be a tough question, I don't know, but you know, while myself and the Hub are going into these communities, are there things that we can do to help partner up with, say, the Green New Deal, to work at getting a Green New Deal win at these communities, or you know, some just recovery principles, etc. So, you know, if you could see us as a tool to help accomplish things like a just recovery and a Green New Deal, is there anything that jumps out at you where you would say, hey, you know, this, you could promote this to each community, or you could promote that to each community? Did that make sense?
I think so. Somebody else, Addie, you can go ahead.
Okay, dang, really throwing me under the bus there. So one thing that I think is incredibly important is knowing what's happening in your community. And I know I'm someone who tends to get caught up in national or international politics a lot, and sometimes I miss what's happening in my own community. So, for example, if there's an expert in that community who knows exactly what the impacts of the climate crisis will be on that community, that's incredibly important. Another thing is going back to what I mentioned earlier about at the start of this, about this crisis and many other crises hurting vulnerable people the most and vulnerable communities the most. If you talk to an activist who represents that community, who can speak to the struggles of their kind of sub-community in that larger community that you're going to, that would be incredibly impactful for initiating a just recovery and supporting a just recovery and the Green New Deal.
Sounds good. Rose, when I go into, our next one's in West Hillhurst, the West Hillhurst Climate Conversation. How can I help promote a Green New Deal while I'm in there?
You don't really need to mention the name. You just have to kind of start talking about the document itself, what's in it, and a lot of people just tend to oh, that sounds really intuitive. Yeah, of course we should start converting lawns into food forests. Of course we should start thinking about the water security crisis. Of course we need to protect our LGBTQ youth. Things like that, and then it just becomes oh, of course. And you kind of realize that people are going to support these ideas because they're kind of common sense on for me personally. And sometimes people get caught up with the name. You don't really need to mention the name. It's all about being able to message the core principles of your initiative or your campaign.
Yeah, I can tell you that in the lead up to the climate conversations, I've really been racking my brain because I want these to be impactful. You know, the conversation part is great, and I think it does a lot, and there's value there. But we really want to be able to point to, look, this got accomplished. This got, you know, we want to move the ball, and you guys get that more than anybody. But just so you know, going through the Green New Deal document here tonight that was shared with me, I was oh yeah, there's just a whole bunch of stuff in here that I can try to see if that'll fit in there. So there are a lot of principles that, you know, we're going to be able to take a look at and see where they might fit in there. So that's some good news. Mackenzie, did you answer? Do you have anything you want to say on any of that?
Not much else. They covered pretty much all of it. Just getting those conversations going.
They're pretty good, eh? They got it all covered.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess the only other question that I really have for you is, you know, you've made your demands, your legislative demands in regard to the throne speech, and now the throne speech is made, and so I gather we can expect that there will be a response from you from Climate Strike Canada. How does when do you expect the response to come in, and how will you go about doing that?
Well, kind of part of our not going back was, I'm not sure if this is tagline, but it was asking our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, if we would be celebrating or protesting tomorrow on the 25th.
Right.
And maybe we're doing a bit of both. Maybe we're celebrating the things we have, but saying we need these to be followed through on. Well, we certainly are saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there will be probably an official response out pretty soon. I'm sure people are already working on it, but I can't give you a date.
Right.
I'd say probably the next week, there'll probably be a response out.
Okay. Adeline, is there anything you want to say on that front?
Just that since, typically throne speeches are more about general ideas rather than specific promises,
right.
We'll probably critiquing more abstractly is what I'm predicting. I can't speak on behalf of Climate Strike Canada, but we're probably not going to be, because we can't target like specific numbers or anything. We can't talk about whether those are enough. Yeah, so we'll see, I guess.
I also think that might be the budget itself will really reflect exactly what's going to happen. Like a lot was said in the throne speech. It's a lot, and so it's like what is going to happen, what's going to get funding. That will give us another clearer idea, and we can really figure out where to go from there.
A thought just occurred to me, so I'll just ask: Is there anything any of you would like to say here tonight, right now, directly to the Prime Minister about climate?
It needs to be a priority, and it needs to be intersectional. Because at this point, it's not just about greenhouse gas emissions, it's about the lives that are being affected.
Right. Rose?
Start working with other parties. I think you can get a lot more done when you have more ideas behind it, especially from an intersectional point of view, because climate justice and climate action needs to be intersectional. You need to work with more people to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Adeline?
Well, I don't think there's any new information that I can introduce to him. He knows the facts. He knows where we are politically. And so he should know what is necessary and what needs to be done to preserve our future.
And there's a reason why thousands of kids will be on the streets across Canada tomorrow.
Right. Okay, well, I have a second, and it's my show, and so I can address the Prime Minister also if I like, I think. And so what I would say to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is you need to listen to the youth. It's a shame to everyone of our generation that they have to spend their time trying to correct us from the disastrously bad management that has gone on up to this point. You need to do right by these kids. I'm sorry, I don't want to call you kids. I never felt right saying the word youths either, but you're a lot younger than me. Anyways, Mr. Prime Minister, you need to do right by these young, bright people, and all of us need to listen to them and to help make what they're asking for is the right thing for us to be doing. And so we need to listen, we need to let them lead, and then eventually we need to start showing, not eventually, we need to now show the leadership that they deserve. Mackenzie, Rose, Adeline, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for being so bright and so courageous, and for making us slow-witted, slow to act adults. Thanks for getting us out of our chairs and making us do stuff. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for making an effort to really support us and listen to us. That really means the world.
Well, you guys don't have to thank me for anything. Everybody should be doing it, but I appreciate what you said. Okay, well, that's about it for this week's A Climate of Change. If you liked this episode, you can find links for the entirety of season 1 in the chat. And I'd like to again just reiterate that we're immensely grateful for the support of Alberta Ecotrust for season 2. I will remind you, as we've spoke about already tonight, tomorrow is the march, the Climate Strike March, Friday afternoon. You should join. And what I would say is, if you haven't made it out yet, make it out. I always hear people say that I just don't have time. Well, you do have time. You have things that you do that everybody has things that they do, and everybody's busy, and I get that. Skip out, find a time to show some support. Come down and check it out. I bet you it's the best you'll have felt in a long time, actually. Beyond that, I'd just like to mention again the Calgary Climate Hub. You can support us by donating it to us. You can also become a member, and you can participate in some of the great initiatives that the Calgary Climate Hub does. And I'll just mention again that when that smoke rolls in, or when you look outside and you see that bright red sun through that haze, I get a feeling. And if you get that feeling, and it's not a good feeling, I can tell you that the only remedy for that is to sit around a table with a bunch of smart people and work on bona fide projects that are going to start fixing the climate crisis. That's how you start feeling better, is if you're doing something. Otherwise, you're just riding a wave that isn't going anywhere. So consider joining the Calgary Climate Hub. And if you can't because you are too busy, consider donating to the Climate Hub. We'll take your cash. We need it. It's a tough dollar in this city. I want to thank our volunteers, Shay, my producer, who's tireless and keeps me online here. Joan and Pamela, who keep me, keep the ball rolling for me in a lot of ways. My friend Paul, who helps me out with the sound. That's all we have to say for now. Oh, I should mention again, the West Hillhurst Climate Conversation, you can send an RSVP for. That will be October 22nd. That's all we have for now. We'll see you tomorrow at the climate strike. Good night. Let's get to work.